The power of pop culture, especially that inspired by K-content, and their impact on Gen Z have become more pronounced in recent times. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective. It's Thursday, November 6th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Quite a number of Gen Z members appear to be seeking comfort in dramas that delve into a past that took place well before their time. For more on this phenomenon and related trends, I have freelance journalist David Lee here in the studio. David, it's great to have you here.
Good to see you again, Sunny.
I also have freelance journalist Raphael Rashid with us. Raphael, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Now, David, for the sake of our viewers who did not have the pleasure of reading your article, could you give us a quick rundown, including details of your interviews of the Gen Z here in the country?
Of course. So about a month ago, I was scrolling through TV, and I noticed that every major channel or cable channel seemed to have a retro drama playing on their channels. And I kind of delved into it deeper, and it turns out that this was true. And some of the titles during that time included 100 Memories, which was about two female lead characters in the 1980s who worked as bus conductors. And people nowadays might not know what these bus conductors do, but they were responsible for collecting the bus fares from the passengers. And it was a job mainly for female workers who didn't have the opportunity to receive higher education at that time. Another title, which recently ended, was Typhoon Family, and this is about a trading company overcoming obstacles during the 1997 Asian financial crisis. But I think this trend of retro dramas, I think really kind of picked up pace with the Reply series, which had its first season in 2012. And it's about these high schoolers and college students who lived in Seoul during the 1980s and 1990s when, and really kind of took a deep dive into how life was back then. So, and I think there are several factors that contribute to this trend. And I think one, it's that the age of the directors and writers of these K-dramas, who are usually in their 30s and 40s nowadays, they had their childhood in the 80s and 90s. So it's kind of become natural for them to write about their core memories. Secondly, I think these retro dramas are something very new and different to other K-dramas, in that the younger audiences have never, they've never had these experiences, shared these memories. And it's because, South Korean society just changed so drastically, I should say, over the past few decades. And we call it the miracle on the Han River, where South Korea became one of the poorest countries in the world after the Korean War to becoming, one of the richest and most developed countries now. But I think it's really the 1990s when most of these changes, these visible changes, were apparent to many people. We went to becoming one of the most modern and digital societies in the world. We went from becoming a government-led economy to a market-oriented economy. We used to be aid recipients, but now we're one of the major donors to many outside countries. And now we're a leader of democracy and globalization for the Asian continent, and so on and so forth. So, but I want to highlight, I think, the deepest reason that these dramas are becoming a trend, and I think it's that they fill in a social need for many people. That's kind of hard to find in today's society. And this was I really felt this when I talked to two 23-year-old university students for my article. And they made some comparisons, such as today everyone's living in apartments, and it's quite rare to have dinners where the whole family is together. Usually a lot of students and office workers, they eat alone because they're so busy. And they were surprised when they were watching the Reply series, the drama, and how there were scenes of neighbors sharing meals with each other and inviting neighbors to come to their house. And another comparison is how today's so-called Hellgate rush hour in subways and buses, people are just too busy pushing each other around for space. But back in the days, people who were sitting down in these buses, they would offer to hold someone's bag for them if they were standing up. So things like this, and I think that's the reason why an interviewer told me that he thinks that his generation is characterized by a certain amount of coldness, where it's more individualistic and where their closest companions are smartphones. And this really plays a contrast to how during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, the whole Korean society were participating in a gold collecting campaign where people literally offered their personal gold to society so that they could help repay the government's debt to the International Monetary Fund. So I think these are some of the outlying trends that make these retro dramas popular today.
Right. So as David just said, Raphael, the Gen Z, they're finding comfort in a past they did not experience. What do you believe perhaps are the deeper generational anxieties, if you will, that seems to be driving this sense of nostalgia?
Sure. I think when we talk about these retro dramas, a lot of people might just say that this is like escapism and, just enjoying the past. But I do think it's beyond this kind of escapism, and I think it's a rational response to what a lot of research, some researchers are calling kind of Korea's collapse of a believable future sort of narrative. So essentially, it's this kind of fundamental anxiety driving this nostalgia, which is things like economic immobility, crystallizing into what feels like a kind of hereditary caste system. We see Korean Gen Z facing this kind of unprecedented trap, the highest university enrollment rates among OECD countries, paired with severe youth unemployment at the moment. Again, maybe nearly 75% of high school graduates attend university, and yet a lot of young people struggle to find jobs these days. We've seen time and time again, at least over the past 5 or 10 years, this so-called spoon theory, categorizing themselves as gold spoons, silver spoons, or even dirt spoons, based on this inherited wealth, because they perceive this social mobility that was sort of promised to them as basically being impossible. We see research that does show that Gen Zs these days have the lowest rates of happiness, highest levels of stress among different, any generation. Life satisfaction is kind of down among many domains. So I think we're seeing this kind of generation that has been sold a promise of maybe meritocracy, but in reality, when it comes to it, and they do try and put their efforts and believe that they can go up the ladder, it might not be that case. And the dream of changing oneself or changing society, if you put effort into it, kind of that dream seems to have vanished for many people. So I think these eras that David has been, recollecting, young people will be romanticizing them, be it the 1970s, 80s, or even the 90s. But I believe that these are kind of the last periods when this upward mobility might have been possible. So I think definitely there is some of that. It would seem that this kind of nostalgia allows them to acknowledge, the present inadequacy without necessarily requiring kind of political demands. They're kind of passively watching it instead of asking for systematic changes per se. So when we look at all of these different types of, looking back at the past, whether it's through music or analog experiences, I do feel they're kind of performing some sort of subtle resistance, I guess, against society. And these things, I guess, they are doing so by essentially retreating to an imagined past that maybe they might yearn for. And I think that tells a lot about the way they look at the future.
Right. Keeping in mind what Raphael has just said, David, and based also on your interviews of members of the Gen Z, do you suppose those who watch these nostalgia-driven dramas perhaps also get to walk away with perhaps a renewed sense of determination about their future? Maybe that where there is a will, there is indeed a way?
Right. Yeah, I think to a certain degree, I think that's true. I think these stories of past generations overcoming, generational hardships of either political oppression or economic crises, I think, and also talking about the warmth of families and communities, I think that's it brings a breath of fresh air for younger audiences, who may be dealing with today's unemployment problem or loneliness in Seoul. But I think that these younger audiences who are attracted to these dramas, I think they're part of a bigger demographic of people who are alert to the trend of, doing things the old way. And I think this largely represents going from an online culture to emphasizing more of the offline culture. And this includes the rising popularity of run crews in South Korea and social gatherings, including wine clubs and other sporting clubs. And I think South Korea, like in the early 2000s, starting from the early 2000s, we've had our own fascination with social media such as World and later Facebook, and then now, I guess, Instagram, to today where, excuse me, a lot of these younger people are using these social apps to actually make in-person connections. Especially after the pandemic, I think they've really felt the need to not only make connections online, but bring those connections to more in-person, more personal connections. And yeah, I think this also goes hand in hand with the trend of going analog. You can see people using old phones, the popularity of LP records. A lot of cafes these days will have LP records. And people, even me, I started to use non-Bluetooth wired earphones. And then there are other people who are going online and social media fasting, trying to take a break from the online world. So yeah, I think this just really goes in line with today's trends, and I think the retro dramas are really, reaping the benefits of it.
Right, and staying with these dramas, Raphael, what would you choose to highlight as the general appeal of these nostalgia-driven dramas for the broader audience beyond the Gen Z?
Yeah, I think that maybe the broader appeal lies in the extraordinary attention to detail when it comes to these dramas, for example. They do definitely recreate kind of genuinely immersive experiences for the viewers, and I think they invest heavily in recreating specific periods of time, moments with like a lot of precision. And a lot of friends, I've asked, do you think it was real, or was it just a cheap, knockoff? And they're like, no, that's really how it was, and that's exactly how they remember it. So when you watch these dramas like When Life Gives You Tangerines, you'll see this meticulous recreation of this pre-digital world. I think the music is also just as important. Gen Z audiences specifically mention being drawn to real instruments or real music, raw emotions or raw voices, rather than maybe heavily processed K-pop of today. So you'll see, I think it was recently when I think there was New Jeans, Hani performing 90s, 80s Japanese kind of city pop, or you'll see a lot of young people flocking to Oasis concerts. Just the other day, actually, I think they're seeking this so-called, genuine music experience, and also. I think the historical authenticity creates that strong appeal. These dramas don't just reference the past, they also actually going set against real events, like David mentioned earlier on, whether it's the IMF crisis or upheaval in the 1970s, 90s, periods where South Korea underwent rapid transformation and modernization. And of course, in these dramas, they will again have a lot of very specific details or kind of props, whether it's like old computers or coffee machines, vending machines, all these kind of things make it a lot more, relatable, I think. So I think these dramas, they serve as kind of historical, maybe archaeology in a way, for audiences who are trying to rediscover the history of their own country.
Right. David, do you suppose that we're going to be seeing a great more number of such screen productions, given their appeal?
Yeah, I don't see a reason why not. Just looking at the fact that this retro trend is really not slowing down in South Korea, or I guess elsewhere in the world as well. And this pertains to fashion. Vintage clothing is really popular in Seoul and in South Korea. You'll see vintage shops just anywhere, in Hongdae, Itaewon, Gangnam. So fashion is a really big thing. Music, Raphael mentioned this, but music from the 80s and 90s, including from symbolic artists like Cho Young-pil or Lee Moon-se, like their music is becoming more recognized by the younger generation and being more streamed by the younger generation. Korean ballads from the 90s and early 2000s, they're making a comeback, I think, slowly, gradually. And if you look at the performance and success of these retro dramas, even some of the recent titles that I mentioned before, and like Raphael mentioned, When Life Gives You Tangerines, which I think is a generational drama, K-drama, and it was the biggest winner during this year's Baeksang Arts Awards. So you can really tell that these dramas are really succeeding in attracting young viewers and viewers of all generations. And even in other countries, they're recognizing how different these dramas are. Typhoon Family, which I mentioned before, is becoming really big in countries like India, and it's breaking viewer rating records in South Korea. And this is kind of a personal recommendation that I really liked. And you can watch it on Netflix. It's called You and Everything Else. It's being recognized as one of the more well-made dramas of this year. And I think one of the reasons that I really felt a connection with it is it has to do with the 1990s, which was the period that I kind of grew up in. So, yeah, I just really don't know if there's a real case or a big reason for these retro dramas to stop. So I think we'll see a lot more titles coming up soon.
I'm actually currently watching Typhoon Family on Netflix right now. Both Typhoon Family and You and Everything Else are based in 1990s then here in South Korea.
Yeah, yes, both of them are. But the latter one, the You and Everything Else, it kind of goes through periods, but yeah, the 1990s is well represented.
Right, because the Typhoon Family itself is specifically focused on the Asian financial crisis of the late 1990s here in South Korea, of course. Meanwhile, Raphael, The Economist had recently published an article about how East Asian pop culture is inspiring Gen Z protests. Tell us a bit more about that particular coverage and your takeaways.
Sure, yeah, I think this represents a kind of remarkable cultural shift where East Asia now supplies what The Economist calls the imaginary and soundtrack of global resistance movements. I think, for generations, Western pop culture, whether it's, punk or hip hop, these have defined useful rebellion in a way, I guess. But now we're seeing, things like anime characters or even K-pop tunes and chants galvanizing this kind of protest culture worldwide. One of the examples is Monkey D. Luffy's Jolly Roger flag from the anime One Piece. Over the summer, young Indonesians were protesting economic hardship and creeping authoritarianism, waving the flag. And then when the government kind of threatened even more, like treason charges, it only broadened the flag's appeal. Then by September this year, it appeared in Nepal during protests that toppled the prime minister there. And then in Madagascar as well, we also saw this flag being used, and it's also been spotted in different places, be it the Philippines, Peru, I think Morocco as well. And then beyond anime, of course, we can't ignore K-pop. And I think Girls' Generation into the New World, Tamanse, as it's belovedly known here, has become a kind of transnational protest anthem. Of course, we saw it during the protests over the past few years in South Korea, and it's become a kind of pro-democracy anthem. And we've also seen it at rallies in Hong Kong, in Thailand, and so again, beyond Korean borders. Also, we saw Thai protesters even don kind of hamster ears from the anime Hamutaro, the Japanese one, and they were chanting about kind of taxpayer money and you know, using the characters, the cartoon's jingle, you know, while protesting in Bangkok. So I think it's quite fascinating how you know, this is a kind of how you know, also social media is accelerating this trend across the world. And I guess on the point when it comes to anime, I think anime is kind of ethnically ambiguous, so it doesn't really define a specific nationality. So I think these kind of fantastical worlds where people live in provide easier identification points for people to rally together rather than maybe Western heroes. Although Western heroes, I have seen some of them at Korean protests. But the kind of message of optimism, Luffy again in One Piece, you can hit me all day long, but I'm never giving up on my dreams. I think this kind of message resonates with young people around the world. So all in all, I think these characters or chants or K-pop anthems, you know, appeal to this generation that is seeking hope amidst chaos, whether it's authoritarian pressures or anything else worldwide.
Right, giving them a sense of hope and inspiration then. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Raphael, as always, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
David, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you, Sunny.
Right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.